And we're going to start with, for many people, the presumed number one overall pick heading into the year, Ron Holland, heading to the G League Ignite. Here's somebody that we both got to get up close eyes on live at the Nike Hoop Summit a few months ago. And a guy who has an intriguing skill set for the modern NBA. So I'm excited to break it down with you. Little background, 6'8", 200. He just turned 18 in July, so he's going to be 18 on draft night, one of the younger players in the draft. Albert, talk to me. What is it about Ron Holland that you like? Because I know that even when we did our quick hit social media segment, when we were in Portland, you called out Ron Holland as the guy you like. So what is it that draws you to Ron Holland?
Corey, even on an amateur level of sports, it's good to be around guys that have that dog in them, which is like such a cliche thing to say, but when you're actually on the field or you're on a court, you can kind of look someone in the eye and you can tell. I play amateur freaking flag football, basketball, softball, but when we play in tournaments, we're in the finals, and you're standing next to a guy, you could see it in their eyes that either they want it or they want to run and hide. The main thing with Ron Holland is when I saw him play, I felt like he just has that desire in him. He's not afraid. I feel like he's going to be a guy that is going to seek out the largest stage that he could possibly find. I think that's why he decided to go to the G League instead of playing in Texas. I think he thought it'd be an opportunity for him to hone his craft, to become a professional basketball player, but to also play maybe on a bigger stage, or maybe at least play against tougher competition. And so I think the biggest thing that stood out to me about Ron Holland was it wasn't really even the skill set or the athleticism or the build or any of that. He just seemed like a guy that wanted to win, that wanted to play hard, that cared about the final product. And so I think that's the first and most important thing that stood out to me with Ron Holland.
Yeah, he's a gamer, right? He's about it. Like that definitely stood out because, you came to the Hoop Summit a couple of days later, right? Than I know myself and Rucker and Metcalf did. And we were at the practices and we were like the motor is not necessarily there. And like, that's his thing. Like, right. This dude is all about the motor. And I had an NBA executive tell me kind of like, hey, this US team, they've been bouncing around from high school competition to high school competition. They're pacing themselves. But once the scrimmages started, and then once the game started, you saw him turn it on in a way that maybe he didn't show in practice. And you saw him go all out. You saw him, do all the things that you expect a Ron Holland to do that he's shown, in his professional film. So, and what does every NBA team want, right? They want a versatile, skilled, two-way, 6'8" wing. And that's what he represents. So, going to the G League Ignite is going to be interesting because there's a lot of talent on that team. And if you're looking for a guy who's going to step up and say, I'm the man, it very well could be him.
I agree, man. I agree. And this is us, not even getting into the nitty gritty of his skill set or his ability on the basketball court. I just feel like sometimes it's not the worst thing to take a bet on a guy that really cares and that is going to work hard. But the interesting thing, Corey, is like by the end of our discussion today about Ron Holland, I think it's going to be really interesting for the listeners to hear about like where we actually have him and where we're projecting him to go, because I don't think either one of us see him as like a number one pick type of guy. But we did want to start this off by saying that we think he's an absolute competitor. Like you said, he's a gamer, he's a dog, he's a guy that really cares about winning. And so I think that's a really good place to start with Ron Holland before we even get into the skills.
Yeah, 100%. And he does have intriguing skills, right? He's not just a guy who is kind of getting by on being an athlete. I think, he's got this real kind of ability to do the athletic stuff, right? We see here he's turning offense to defense. He's going to get after it. He's going to play two ways. And he's going to, get some easy points at the rim, just based on the fact that he does compete on both ends and turn offense to defense. But I think that where I really like him, because I love him in that half court, but
Mhm.
it's or in the full court. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I like when he's playing in like chaos,
Yeah.
in like broken plays, just kind of living in the moment and just kind of like improvising. And we see here in this clip, Oak Ridge is pressing Duncanville, and Holland gets the ball. And as soon as he does, he just turns the Jets on, he dribbles through everybody and takes it coast to coast for the finish. And that's the kind of stuff that I like from him. It's also, though, some of my worry is that he does have that effort. He does turn it on. And you see here against this team, he just is a little bit more athletic,
Mm.
and a little bit more aggressive than maybe some of the guys on the court. And now he's going to be making that transition to the NBA. But at the lower levels, it's worked.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really strong, great point that you're making there, Corey. I think, but Corey, like the first thing that I wrote in my notes about him is I think he's athletic, but I didn't think he was like the wildest athlete, which is
Yeah.
important because against that level of competition, it's going to pop. But I'm just going to be totally honest here. For a guy that's 6'8" with his physique, some of his dunks left me wanting a little bit more,
Missed a
and
lot of dunks.
that too. And just like the vertical is just not. I mean, he's not Amen Thompson, not Cam Whitmore, in my opinion. But not to say that he's a bad athlete either. It's just we won't be talking about Ron Holland as a generational athlete ever, or even, in my opinion, maybe not even as like a top tier elite athlete. But he does have athleticism, and I think a lot like what you said, Corey. There is a little bit of that junkyard dog to him, where in that chaos, in the madness, during a broken play, in transition, that's where he can, take advantage of these opportunities that kind of fall to him because of how hard he plays or because of his activity level and him just being around the hoop. That's a nice little putback there, right? But also, like, that wasn't like a skyscraper putback either,
Right.
right? Even like Iman Shumpert against the Pacers, like that was one where he was really flying, soaring through the air in the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. But no, with Holland, though, I do want to say I think you're making a really important point, Corey, where he was a good athlete, played really hard, kind of imposed his will at times against lower levels. But in the G League, it will be tested. But to his defense, though, Corey, in the like him playing in those like Rico Hines runs, like you have like you can see that his body is developing a little bit too. So that'll be something to watch to see how his body continues to develop, how he continues to add size to his physique, and how he takes on, grown men as he, plays the way that he plays.
Yeah, and like you said, he's going to clean up the garbage. He's going to get a lot of easy hustle points just because of his activity. But yeah, the athleticism in my notes, I have good, not great athlete. Decent. Dirty Dancer in the comments says Ron Holland is closer to a DeAndre Hunter type athlete than a nuclear one. Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's going to be using the term nuclear to describe Ron Holland. And I'm interested to see how that translates. And you mentioned the Rico Hines run. One thing that we didn't see in there, and we'll touch on it a little later, though.
Oh yeah.
Not a lot
Yeah.
of shooting highlights.
Yep. Yep.
It's
Yep.
all going to the rim, all being aggressive, because that's what he does, right? He likes to be at the rim. He likes to be aggressive. If he doesn't have the ball, he's crashing the offensive glass. He's getting these hustle points. But, he does have the ability to play a little bit in the half court and create a little bit of his own offense as well. And, we'll see here, little hesitation, changes pace, quick first step, gets to the rim, and uncontested at the rim for a dunk. Nice, fluid ball handler, a little loose there after the hesitation, but that's a nice play going to the rim. And even if he's not a nuclear athlete,
Right.
if he's got a straight line, you probably don't want to get put on a poster if you're a 17-year-old kid. And if you get contested there, he's going to be aggressive. He's willing to attack and get to the rim, right? Like he's willing to go and get fouled and play through the physicality. Synergy didn't have a ton of the Duncanville games up, and they had 6 games up. but I believe he got to the line 40 times in those 6 games. So he's willing to go and play tough through your chest and be physical and get to the line. Now, when we get to the shooting conversation, we'll talk about what exactly that means. But I like that even with the frame that he has that isn't developed, and he's going to the G League, like you said, he's going to be able to work on that in a professional way, focus strictly on the basketball and not be a student athlete. I think that will help with the strength because, there are certainly times where even if he does go and attack the rim hard and he is aggressive, as we'll see in this clip that I just pulled up, sometimes he'll try to go through somebody and they just won't get moved.
Yep. 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 Corey, I think it's really important for us to say the overarching theme when it comes to Ron Holland, as we get deeper into his breakdown right now, is that he needs refinement. I think at almost every level, every aspect, every part of his game, he needs refinement, which is why I actually really applaud him for going to the G League. I think that is where he's going to be tested. Like, that is the toughest test I think he could have taken in terms of like his development, right? You talk about the handle, we're going to talk about the shooting, we're going to talk about his physique, the strength, how he operates in the half court, in transition. All these things need refinement. I don't think there's one aspect of his game other than his mentality that I think is really, really good right now. I think every aspect of his game needs a lot of work, needs a lot of refinement, fine tuning, whatever word you want to use. He needs help is where he's at. And I think him going to the G League is a great idea because he's going to get good coaching there. He's going to be put in the mixer against really, really tough competition, tougher than anywhere he's played against, I think, until now. I mean, right now at Rico Hines, he's playing against some pretty tough NBA guys, I'm sure, right? Or that level, around that level.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
overall, man, it's refinement. That's what he needs. That's the overarching theme over everything. Every part of Ron Holland as a basketball player needs work right now.
Yeah. I mean, and look, all of the prospects in this class,
Yeah.
we can say that about. This is not, and honestly, even Wembanyama last year, there were always
True.
things you could say that these guys need to refine and work on. It's just a little bit more highlighted in this class. Now, when I was watching him, not only with the strength, I think when he drives with his right hand, I think he's really good.
Sure.
He's really strong. And he's got good touch there. But when he has to go with these offhand finishes, I think it gets a little rough. And for a guy who is downhill, who does have questionable shooting numbers, he was 53.3% at the rim, 50% in the half court, 36.4% on layups, according to Synergy in the EYBL. At Duncanville, a 6-game sample size, so a little bit less, 70.6% at the rim, 80% in the half court, 70% on layups. So much better numbers, lower sample size. So, and that season is post the EYBL season, so there's a progression there. I think he's somewhere in the middle of that. I think he'll be good, but I think that strength and that kind of touch with his offhand is going to be something that he needs to work on, because as you get to higher levels and the scout on you is that you want to get downhill to your strong side, they're going to try to weak you. And then if you can't move them, if you can't deal with that physicality, they're going to play you to your weaknesses. We saw a guy like Jaden Hardy struggle with that a lot to start the year in the G League a couple of years ago. So these are things that I think I really want to see if he's going to be able to make those adjustments throughout the G League season. If he starts out and he's not perfect, it's not a death sentence. It's just what is he doing to make those numbers, trend in the right direction.
For sure. And Corey, what you said earlier is really important as well. And the fact that he's one of the youngest guys in this class, and that youth is definitely on his side. That's something that NBA front offices are going to weigh heavily, as they always do. Once again, I think he chose the right path. I think he chose the right challenge. And I do want to say, Corey, I've heard comps, right, for him, like Jaylen Brown is one I've heard a couple of times, right? And I think, I get it, but I also, there's a lot of projecting that happens there, right? There's a lot of, you being glass half full for us to really consider him as a Jalen Brown type of guy. I understand some of the comps, right? He is a good athlete, but at the same time, like also his handle needs a lot of work. It needs to be tightened, as you highlighted in a couple of the different clips here. For as good as his handle can be for that size, it also needs to be tightened up. There are holes to it, and like you said before, Corey, that like it's just a lot of it is accentuated right now because of the overall weakness of this class. When everyone is kind of, pretty imperfect and has a lot of holes, and you start to see them more and more. But with Ron, I just want to reiterate once again, though, if you have a prospect that has a lot of holes, it's better to take a prospect that's still really young and has a desire and the work ethic to get better. So I think that's something we're definitely going to have to monitor throughout the G League season. And it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time. And we can't, like you said, Corey, we shouldn't judge him too early on in the G League season either.
No, and I think that the open space is going to be good for him because he does have some slick moves right here. You see that smooth Euro step, right? I'm gonna pull up another clip here, which he's gonna get to the rim off a reject, which I think is pretty slick. So he's got that ability to play with the ball in his hands, and the handle does look good at times. So he gets in the rim, nice little move there in the EYBL. Now, when it comes to the G League Ignite versus the college route, I see pluses and minuses for Ron Holland in both directions.
Okay.
Because we know that the G League Ignite does not have, those prospects are not under the same microscope as the college prospects are.
Yeah.
Their games aren't as easily accessible. Scoot Henderson, one of the best point guard prospects that we've had in many, many years. How many people watch Scoot play before he played in that summer league game?
Right.
There's from the general public's perspective, not the people that are listening to this podcast on this channel or, all of the other great draft analysts, the people that are just casuals, they're not seeing Scoot Henderson. Maybe they watch the Wemby game, but for the most part, you don't know. So Ron Holland's not going to have that same pressure to be awesome right away. But at the same time, we've also seen that sometimes the G League Ignite route, you could start out as the top ranked prospect or one of the top ranked prospects, and you can really fall by the wayside in the conversation if you struggle. Pros and cons. He can go to college, struggle with some of the stuff that Texas does, and you could drop like a Dariq Whitehead. So there's no right answer for him. I think there's pros and cons to each decision, but ultimately I kind of feel like the G League Ignite situation is probably a little bit better for him because he's going to have more room. And even if he, isn't on the tip of everyone's tongue, I still think it's the right path for him.
Yeah, and also Corey, I think he's in an interesting position right now where a lot of different outlets and media people have him at number one, which I think actually helps your argument, right? Like because he's starting preseason and early on as the number one guy, even if as you mentioned, it's a little bit harder to get to the G League games just because he's being touted as like a number one guy or a contender for number one. People may, go out of their way to try to find more G League games. But I think the biggest thing for me was I like the fact that he's going to go against harder competition. I think the whole idea of iron sharpens iron and him going against adult men that are, going to bully him at times that won't be as affected by his athleticism and intensity. I think that's good for him because he's going to learn, okay, I can't just run through people. I can't just run past people. I can't just outwork people all the time, right? These are bigger guys, more athletic guys, more seasoned and more veteran guys that I'm going to have to develop different aspects of my game to be effective here, to survive here in the one season that I'm here. So, Corey, I think you make a great point, but I'm with you. I do think this was the better route just because of the testing of it all.
Yeah. It's going to be exciting. Now, let's transition here. Let's talk about the shooting, the swing skill for him.
Sure.
This is he's got to prove that he's going to be able to knock down jump shots. Now, he shot 29.7% at EYBL, 56.4% from the free throw line. This is a 13-game sample. At Duncanville, he was 25% from the three-point line, 80% from the free throw line on those 40 attempts in the 6-game sample. I believe he was in the 64-65% range in the FIBA from the free throw line. I think he was, pretty poor in FIBA as well, but a lot of guys struggle in the FIBA competition with their shooting numbers. Not great. Seeing it in person, there wasn't a lot of consistency to it. It was not something that I said, oh man, this is a skill you could bank on. Where are you at with his shooting, and what does that mean for him as a prospect?
There were times in person where I was like, oh, that's not bad. And then there were times in person where I was like, well, that's not great either. I think his base is just super narrow, dude. Sometimes it's like his feet are just straight up together when he's catching the ball, and it's just not great. A little bit of a disconnect, in my opinion. Just like when you watch him shoot, sometimes he just looks like a pole almost. Like it's really, really narrow stuff. Obviously, not going to help in terms of him shooting from distance. Yeah, man, I understand, Corey, which is why, like, later on, if we talk about what range we have him in, that the shooting is the big reason why I don't have him as my number one prospect right now. Just because, once again, like when I saw it in person, there were times like he hit a couple in a row, and I was like, okay, this is good. But then also he would throw up some absolute monstrosities sometimes, and you just go, okay, well, then the hell was I looking at before? Or what were you doing before? Type of thing. But yeah, it's just overall the biggest concern for me. Obviously, I'm not the shot doctor on our pod, but a lot of it looked super narrow, and I didn't love that.
Yeah, I mean, he needs reps. Drew Davis in the comments says needs to stop growing in a good coach, maybe 3 months. I think it's going to take him longer than 3 months to become like an adequate shooter. He's also going to be adjusting to a deeper line in gameplay, longer guys closing out to him. So I do think that's going to be a struggle for him. I don't think up top it's bad. Like the release, I think is okay.
Yeah.
Good follow through, high release, it's pretty smooth. Like you said, the base is very upright, very narrow. His whole body is very narrow. He's very pencil-like in general. But even on here, this make that we're showing, you could see his shot prep and him just stepping into the shot, even on a make, like he's kind of just in a standstill. And I don't love that. Now you mentioned like sometimes you watch him and you're like, oh, right.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where the Jaylen Brown stuff comes from, right?
Right.
Like,
right. That looks good.
That's pretty tough.
Mhm.
That's pretty tough. Comes down the court confidently, steps into like a behind the back, off the bounce three.
Mhm.
Kwame Evans just leaves him in the dust. Splash. Kwame Evans, long defender, agile, and quick stop. Now, again, the footwork's not great, right? But pretty nice. Pretty nice. And look, even on, I'm gonna pull up another off the bounce shot where he's gonna miss. The setup is nice.
Mm-hmm.
The space creation's nice. It's gonna come down to at what level does he get to with consistency as a shot maker? That's pretty smooth,
Yeah,
right?
this
And
is good.
it very well could have gone in.
Yeah.
There's nothing that makes you go, he can't get that shot off. He can't hit that shot. It's just like he's got to start hitting the shots.
Even his base looks better on that shot than most of his shots.
Yeah. So there's something there. There's not reason to completely sell on it, but there's also no reason to buy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, Corey, what we're both saying is that I don't think we believe that his shot is broken. It's just until we see it go in more often, it's hard to believe. and it's hard to buy because there are a lot of people out there that have pretty looking shots, but they don't go in as much as you think they do. That's a real reality, right? Like, he's got to be more consistent. And if he's going to play as like a 6'8" wing guy, then what are we talking about? Like, if he doesn't have the jumper in his repertoire, and it's not something that he can consistently go to. Now, what he does have is confidence. That's something that we've seen all the time with him, which Corey, you and I are big believers in, right? We like
Yeah,
guys
sure.
that even if their jumpers are not perfect, if they've got the confidence, we're gonna get behind a guy like that, right? So
Let it fly.
exactly, which is why once again, going back to the G League thing, like with more space and NBA level coaching, and guys getting at him, I, there might be a world where his shooting improves. And if it does, Corey, let's say he gets to the G League and on decent volume, he shoots 35, 36% from three. I think our tune will change a little bit, right? As you said when you started the segment, it is his swing skill set. So if his game's going to round out and he's going to shoot the jumper at a pretty decent level and he gets to the free throw line at a high clip and shoots it better than 56%, let's say he gets to like 70, 75%, I think we'll feel a lot better about it than we do right now. But I also do believe that neither one of us are saying that his shot is broken. It's just he needs more reps. He needs to continue to work on it, and we'll see 6 months from now.
Yeah. Well, it might be broken right now, but I think that it's something. It's not shattered.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not shattered. You can pick up the pieces and you can put it back together,
Sure.
I think, in the right scenario. I don't want to spend a ton of time on the passing because I don't think it's something that I would
It's
necessarily
fine.
say is like a strength, but I think it's something that he can do, that he's capable
Yes.
of. I think, he sees the floor, nice little drive and kick to the weak side. So I think it's a skill that I'm going to be interested to see how it looks with a ton of space on an NBA court and his ability, to get into the paint and get touches. In the comments, I'm going to say Fralipka
Uh-huh.
says Isaiah Todd shot 36% from three and went 31st in the 2021 draft. Not the same player,
Not yeah, I was
you know,
yeah, they're
and
different
and
players.
and where we're going to go with this next is that Ron Holland, he has real two-way ability, right? And Isaiah Todd, I don't think had that same kind of defensive versatility that Ron Holland does, where I think Ron Holland's going to be able to guard multiple positions. You said he has to get stronger, so I think those strong fours are going to give him trouble, but he has the lateral quickness to really give guys trouble, stay in front of quick guards, and use his length in those mismatch scenarios to make an impact on both ends. Whereas Isaiah Todd, there were a lot of questions about that, and really Isaiah Todd needed to also be able to go and play the five, right, and be a center, and protect the rim at his size, and it's just not a skill that he showed that he could do. Where I think Ron Holland has the ability to really make an impact defensively too.
Yeah, I think ultimately the archetype of players is different. So for Litka, I understand the point that you're trying to make, but I don't know if that's necessarily an effective point here, just because once again, like the archetype's way different. And also for the record, I really liked Isaiah Todd, and I'm still
Yeah,
rooting
we
for him,
both
man.
did. We both did.
Yeah, we exactly, Corey. We both did. We're still both rooting for him, man. Like just because he spent a couple of years in the G League doesn't mean his career is over, right? He could still end up somewhere, be a small ball five, maybe shooting four, whatever. But regardless, okay, back to Ron Holland. I like Ron Holland on the defensive side of the ball, though, Corey. I think one thing that stood out to me was I think I saw him practice once and then scrimmage once and then playing the game once. Thought he was a good talker, man. Like it's good to have guys that communicate well on the floor, that could see what the offense is doing and call out assignments and just be a good communicator on the floor. I think he does that. Think he obviously, as you mentioned, as you highlighted already, good lateral movement for a guy his size, good length to him as well. I also feel like Corey, and this might just be a me thing, and I might just be like half glass full on every guy. But I think his frame is going to fill out. Like I think eventually, I know he's really thin right now, and he's very, as we both talked about, kind of looks like a pole right now. But I think it could happen. I think he could continue to develop, and his physique will get better. But overall, I like the demeanor on the defensive side of the ball, the lateral movement, the length, active hands, and the communication was the biggest one that stood out to me.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how he continues to develop and if he can, really iron out some of those improvement areas and live up to that billing of, potential top 5 pick. Before we move on, you mentioned it, you wanted to talk about, ranges for a guy like him. What range, do you have him in right now?
I think right now I have him like back. I have him in the teens, is where I have him right now, and I
Mm,
feel like that's where he should be, in my opinion. I think
mm,
it's kind of unfair to him to be like, "Hey, he's the number one guy right now." I don't feel that way, but yeah, I feel like anywhere from teens to like back half of the top 10.
mhm.
Uh, wouldn't be in my top 5 right now. Oh, no, sorry, is not in my top 5 right now.
Yeah, I think I have him at 10 or 11 right now.
Okay,
Is where I
similar.
have him.
Yeah.
Uh, he's a guy that I felt when I left Hoop Summit, I did feel underwhelmed
Mhm.
because I thought that when he was going up against like the tippy top peers of his peers, I didn't see that standout that, his ranking kind of you know, says that he should have stood out in that setting. And when there are a bunch of other guys with size and length and athleticism and the shot's not falling, I just didn't see that I'm the dude
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And he in the game he was excellent. And when we spoke to him uh after the game, he had that kind of like I'm the dude demeanor, like this cool confidence. So I still think there's a lot to like. I still think he's a really fun prospect, but I think that if he's going to be the number one guy, I think the expectations there might just be too high.
Mm.
Even if he's the number two prospect, if you think his teammate on the G League Ignite might be the number one guy, like I, I think that those expectations, given where he's at as a shooter right now and where the league is trended, and the fact that I don't think he's say like even the same level of playmaker or close to where like Asar was last year. Now
Yeah.
he's going to be a year plus younger than Asar,
Right.
you know? Um, but even still, I think Asar showed those flashes the year prior to his draft year. Um, but I think Asar is kind of the template for what I want, and that's a really valuable player.
Mm.
But I think Asar was bouncier. I think he
Yeah.
has similar shooting issues.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily know if I felt more confident in Asar shooting. I think they're similarly tiered there. I liked his frame better, um, and I liked his passing instincts better, and I think even the defensive chops. So that's kind of the model and the player I want to see. I think it's valuable, but depending on where you're getting him, is going to kind of be just how valuable do you value that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree, man. I definitely agree. Um, we'll see. I feel like him being in that like early teens range is much better, much more accurate to even where he is currently in his development. And I mean, look, Corey, we both really hope he has an awesome season for the G League and he proves both of us wrong. And who knows, right? Maybe a couple months from now, we might be like, hey, he's top 5 because of what he
Yeah,
does in the G League. It could happen. So.
yeah, it's definitely in the cards for sure.